Okay, greetings everyone. Hello. Happy Monday. Happy first week of the fall semester of 2023. Coming at you talking about Communication Studies 404, which is Principles of Persuasion. So this is now the second time that I will be teaching this class. This is normally a class that Dr. Bloomfield teaches, but she's been on leave for a couple of cycles. And so I picked up this class. So it was a brand new class for me last fall, and this time around it's another kind of attempt to teach this stuff and try out these readings and assignments. And I think it went quite well last time I did it. I enjoyed it, and so looking forward to this version. So my name is Donovan Conley. I'm an associate professor of rhetoric in the Department of Communication Studies, and I've been here since 2004. I'm the most senior member of the program at this point. Seen a lot of people come and go. I've seen a lot of changes. I got to say, I'm quite excited about the kind of state of the department. We have a brand new chair that just started with us. His name's Dr. Jeffrey Child, and he's terrific. And a lot of really cool things happening in our department and our college, and so it's a nice time to be studying communication and thinking about rhetoric and influence and persuasion, and that's what we're doing in this class. And so I am a rhetoric scholar. My particular interest in rhetoric is to be thinking about the kind of rhetorical influence as it kind of shapes its way through culture, through everyday life. I'm really interested in forms of influence that we might not normally recognize as influence, or what I call invisible influence. And so you can think about rhetoric as words and arguments and explicit attempts to persuade, but you can also think about it as not words and not arguments and not explicit attempts to persuade. So if you just, to kind of like jump way ahead here, if you look at the rundown of the units. There's 5 content units in this class on the second page at the top there. It lists them sort of like how long they take. There's 5 units, and we start off looking at persuasion in its most sort of obvious literal forms, right? And then we go into formal and explicit forms of persuasion, and then the whole kind of shape of the class and the flow of the class is to move from the most obvious, the most explicit, the most formal, recognizable kind of examples of persuasion, right? Like arguments or like advertisements or campaigns or whatever. Things that we would always recognize as being attempts to persuade, right? What's going on there? What's involved? But as we move through, we get a little bit more subtle. We get a little bit more difficult to spot attempts to persuade. And so we go to semi-formal and suggestive persuasion. And then we go to informal and implicit persuasion, and we end off with persuasion or prediction. And it's a question because that's where we're dealing with like technology and all the kind of invisible hidden stuff that's moving through these platforms and mediums and technologies and devices that we are surrounded by and that we wear and that we have on our bodies or nearby our bodies all day, every day, and that do a ton of persuasive or swazery work on us, on our bodies, on our brains, and our limbic systems, and our appetites, and so on. And I want to finish off this class by thinking about the most hidden, the most invisible kind of examples of persuasion as influence as we can think about. So the class as a whole is not just about strict persuasion. It takes a slightly broader approach to the question of persuasion by covering a bunch of different examples of ways that we are moved around. I think about any one of us living our lives in our bodies, inside of our shells, walking around, going through our daily lives, all the different ways that we are reached out toward, or that we are impacted by, or touched by, or mediated toward, or whatever, right? All these different systems and mediums and messaging sources, and I just see all this kind of stuff, and a lot of times it's invisible because it's like it's a sound, or it's an image over there, or it's a scroll on the screen or whatever, but it's all trying to get you, right? It's all coming at us. It wants something from us, whether it's our attention, whether it's our money, whether it's our time and effort, right? I need you to help me solicit on behalf of this cause, or I need you to donate, or I need you to spend some time, or I need you to, right? We are just living our lives, everyday lives. We are absolutely bombarded with persuasive appeals, persuasive influences. This class wants to be thinking about that phenomenon in a broad and robust sense so that we can be more alert, be more alive and awakened to the sheer range of influence and persuasion that is kind of coming at us. And also to be thinking about when we are engaged in persuasive efforts ourselves. Are we aware when we are trying to influence or perhaps manipulate or perhaps trying to cajole or whatever, seduce? Are we aware? It's better to be aware, to know when you're doing it, to know when it's happening to you, to know when it's happening well or poorly, when it's, when there's integrity to the process or there is stinkiness in the process or whatever. This class wants to kind of wrangle with all that stuff. And so I'm very excited about it because, again, I'm a rhetoric scholar. Persuasion, I don't know if anyone's in my, also in my 409 rhetorical tradition class, it's possible. It's a lot of overlap, right? So where we start in the rhetorical tradition class is with basically Aristotle, a little bit before Aristotle, but Aristotle's the key figure in the ancient context in terms of like coming up with a really strong conception of rhetoric as persuasion. Aristotle's definition of rhetoric is the ability to discover the available means of persuasion in a given case. And pretty much every word of that definition is significant in its own way. But this idea of the ability to discover the available means of persuasion, what is going to persuade in this case? Persuasion's always situated. It's always now. It's always happening here and now. And the fact that it's not like a one size fits all kind of thing. It's like this instance of persuasion is organic and unique, and therefore needs to ask that question of what are the available resources of persuasion, right? What's available? That's one of the richest phrases, the available means of persuasion. What's available? What are the means by which I can persuade you, or you can persuade me, or we can persuade each other? What's available in terms of a resource, in terms of a persuasive resource? That's a really important question, and this class is really rooted in that. What's available? What is being used? Whether it's fear, or whether it's flattery, or whether it's a specific new media technology. I study food. I write about food. So for me, sugar is an available persuasive that has been utilized by major, food conglomerates to get more people to be persuaded to buy products. Just put more sugar in it, or more salt, or more fat, whatever, right? Manipulation. I would think of all of this as essentially rhetoric in the sense that you're trying to get people to do something that they're not already doing. Buy more cereal, eat more cereal, or consume more whatever, to think more about this, or to engage in it more. But you could also go in another direction. You can get people to do other things that they're doing that they shouldn't be doing. Stop smoking, right? Stop vaping, or whatever. All of this stuff is persuasive. It involves attempts to appeal to brains, appeal to thoughts, appeal to values, appeal to sensibilities, appeal to feelings and sensations, right? It's all suasory. Now, in the ancient context, starting rhetoric by talking about persuasion, for a long time, rhetoric and persuasion were essentially the same thing. But today, in the the early 21st century, late 20th century, not so much, we in this department have a class on rhetoric and we have a class on persuasion. Why do we need two, right? Well, persuasion today is a much more specific thing than rhetoric. Rhetoric has grown and grown and grown, and it's like so many different things. It's still also persuasion, though. Persuasion has, over the course of the last 100 years or so, kind of gone in the direction of sociologists, psychologists, behavioral economists, software engineers, right? They're really interested in how to persuade, to manipulate, to influence, to affect. Rhetoric scholars have gotten much more interested in bigger questions about like identity and culture and power and so on and so on. Nevertheless, I would argue that persuasion is still very much a rhetorical matter. And so when we are thinking about persuasion in this class, we are essentially thinking about rhetoric. So let's see. That's sort of the rundown of the conceptual side of this class. There is no book that you will need to purchase. Everything's going to be available in Canvas, including a lot of chapters from Perloff. So I decided not to just have you buy the Perloff book. It's a big, heavy, expensive textbook. And so a number of those chapters are copied for you, and then we go in different directions as well. But everything you need is in Canvas, all the readings, a lot of videos, and some notes as well. So the way to proceed is we have the assignment due dates and the kind of the basic breakdown of the assignments on the second page there. We've got unit quizzes, an analysis paper, and a final exam, which is just a bigger quiz essentially. So as I mentioned, we have 5 content units. They each run about 3 weeks or so. I think they all run 3 weeks. So the class is kind of broken down into these 5 3-week bite-sized units, and each of these units culminates in a quiz. And the quiz is going to, test your handling of the concepts. It's going to ask you some questions. So there's a little bit of short answer response in addition to some multiple choice questions. Those are each worth 20 points. The analysis paper is, all right, we've been spending this whole semester learning about different aspects of persuasion. Now we're going to choose a persuasive phenomenon and we're going to analyze it. So it's a little bit like rhetorical analysis, but we are looking specifically and expressly for the aspects of persuasion in this specific phenomenon. So we'll talk more about that. That's toward the end of the semester. And then the final exam, as I mentioned, is just a bigger, more robust quiz, essentially. So you have the due dates there. I hope you like the flow of things. So it's 3 weeks of reading and watching videos and thinking about the concepts and the material, and then a quiz that's going to test your handle on that. And it hopefully will build all toward this final analysis paper and the final exam, where you're going to kind of put these ideas into practice in terms of diagnosing and kind of assessing and evaluating some persuasive effort. So that's kind of the gist in terms of the content and the assignments. You'll see on the course schedule here, everything's broken down in terms of weeks. And so I think I open up the units one at a time, and then when you're done one unit, you can move on to the next unit. I would recommend just doing the material like each week as you're seeing it on the syllabus here. So this week, August 28th through September 3rd, we are looking at Aristotle. So thinking about rhetoric as persuasion goes right back to Aristotle. So I want to really kind of just like drill down on the source for thinking about persuasion. He talks about the modes of appeal, ethos, logos, pathos, the genres. There's a few kind of really important basic concepts from Aristotle that we want to nail down. So that's this week. And then week 2 and 3, we've got some other kind of basic core theories, thinking about persuasion, some of the dominant theories in persuasion, the elaboration likelihood example, the reasoned action example. And then the 3rd week, we get into cognitive dissonance and inoculation. These are really interesting, chewy kind of theories that we'll play around with. And then you'll see that the Friday, September 15th, is our first quiz or test. So the quizzes will be on Fridays. That's the kind of the end of the week. You'll still have Saturday and Sunday if you want it. That's technically not still like, I don't know, the work week or whatever. So Fridays will be the quiz days, and then you'll have 2 more days to kind of wrap up, I guess, and then we start the next week on the next Monday. So, like I said, I taught this one other time. I thought the readings went really well. There's some that I'm really thrilled about, like the Wolbert reading, the McLuhan reading, the Davis reading on artifacts and affordance theory and so on. We'll get there. We're not going to be doing majorly deep dives in terms of reading content. I think it's just the right amount, right? We're getting a good coverage in terms of breadth. We're getting decent coverage in terms of depth. Hopefully the videos will help and the reading prompts, and you'll have lots of supplementary kind of support as you're working through the materials. So just look at the weeks, go to Canvas, everything's laid out just as you're seeing it on the syllabus. Just kind of work your way through, and you should be fine. I have listed my office hours on here. They're going to be on Tuesdays from 1:30 to 3:30. I teach one section of my rhetorical tradition class on campus this semester. So that wraps up at 1, and then I'll have my office hours on Tuesdays in the afternoon. Would love it if you came by, just to say hi, just to introduce yourself, to ask a question, or just to chit-chat, whatever. I do miss interacting with my undergraduate students. That's actually why I requested teaching an in-class section this fall. So, by all means, email, reach out if you want. We can also set up a Zoom call or meeting. But I would super love it if you guys came by my office hours and said hi. And especially if you had something you wanted to chat about, do come by. It's much better in person, I believe. So hopefully that's useful enough in terms of the flow of the class and what to expect. The university policy stuff kicks in toward the end. I've just put a link so you can go to sort of read through all of the policies if you want, but I did also want to throw in a couple of the more relevant ones. Obviously, AI, generative AI, is the big issue at the moment. This mostly just kicked in last spring. And unfortunately, I did fail some students on their final test for one of my classes in the spring because they were inserting the questions on the test into ChatGPT and then cutting and pasting back into the test. Not allowed, gang. Not allowed. I said a version of that in a video I posted in the spring. I was like, just go ahead and play around with it. They're fascinating and they actually can be helpful and open things up and point you in certain directions, but they're not trustworthy. Trust me, they are not trustworthy. They will make errors. They will send you in wrong directions. They will give you information that looks and sounds totally confident, but oftentimes is not. So be careful. Yet I still had students just like dumping the questions in there and just like plopping the answers back in. Please do not do that. By all means, use ChatGPT or one of these other ones to, to snoop around, to try it out, to play around with ideas, to test ideas, to brainstorm, right? I actually use these services in my own writing, my research. I just don't quote. I always verify, right? So whatever it spits back at me, it's basically just sending me in more directions to make sure that what it's saying is true and accurate. So don't use these as a way to generate responses. Don't use them as a way to generate tests or test responses or papers, obviously. And don't cite them either. I would not recommend using them in any formal way except to just bounce ideas off of. But use it as a very soft, kind of offline, like on the side kind of research tool, if at all. It's a very evolving kind of phenomenon. It's evolving very quickly. They're getting better all the time. But these things do not think, and they do not care, and they don't have your questions at heart. They don't have your interests at heart. They just spit back probabilities in terms of textual associations. And it's just not good enough in terms of, the work that we're asking you to do is meant to be like critical and analytical and independent. And so by all means, like try out an idea and then make it your own. Just always make it your own. Make the words your own, make the ideas your own. If you're getting something from somewhere else, by all means cite it. But these things are so unreliable and unpredictable that they're just a kind of like don't go there in terms of your formal submissions, okay? So I'll just kind of like properly state that at this point, and if you have questions or you want to chat about that more, or if you have a different kind of interpretation, I'm all open. I'm open to it. This is a very weird moment that we are in because pretty soon, probably in the next year, couple years, these things are just going to be so, woven into our daily lives that we won't even know. So we're figuring it out. But right now, they're still problematic. They still hallucinate. They come up with wrong information, unreliable information. So just be careful. Avoid them in terms of what you submit in this class. That's my main point. I'm trying to think if I've missed anything. So there's principles of persuasion for you, gang. Please launch with the material, with the videos, with the Aristotle stuff. We have 3 weeks of learning theories, learning concepts, getting sort of involved in this question of persuasion. What's involved, what are some key questions, some patterns, some familiar kind of tendencies and so on. And then our first quiz. So hope everyone's well. I do hope I get to meet you and chat with you at some point. If you have questions, by all means reach out. Otherwise, enjoy, have a great semester, and hope to see you or talk to you soon. Peace.